don't think it's any secret to anybody who knows me or knows what I'm about that I'm a really massive DC Comics fan. I like Marvel. I really do like Marvel, and the stuff they've been doing with movies and whatnot, they really have been knocking out of the park. But my heart will always be with Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and in particular Green Lantern. I love the Green Lantern Corps. I especially love Jeff Johns' run, but I like a lot of the older stuff as well. I don't know what it is. I guess I just like the idea of a cosmic police force that has relied so long on all the races of the universe apart from Earth, because Earth, way too emotional, way too almost hysterical, can't do anything without having a massive spaz attack about everything. There's just so much emotional energy flying around there that Earthmen are just regarded as, you know, unstable practically. Some more than others, it has to be said. Some have been better than others. But in particular, I do like this guy, Hal Jordan, who was, you know, I won't say the original Green Lantern because that was Alan Scott, but he was Hal, the original cosmic Green Lantern, the original spacefaring Green Lantern, whereas Alan Scott obviously stayed on Earth because he wasn't really powered by the Guardians of Oa and the Guardians of the Universe. But Hal Jordan has a special place in my heart. He's not my favourite Green Lantern. My favourite Green Lantern, well, when he is a Green Lantern, is Guy Gardner, because I just like the guy that will use his power to smack the crap out of people who deserve smacking the crap out of. Hal Jordan is a bit less like that than he used to be, but yeah, he appeared first in 1959 when DC basically did a massive company-wide reboot, and that almost never happens these days, does it? But in 1959 they had a complete change of direction from the Golden Age to the Silver Age and then the Bronze Age. The reason for this is very simple. The world fell out of love with comic books. They had real-life heroes in the shape of you know, war heroes and all that had gone on. The Second World War had been and gone, and Superman and the rest just weren't needed. So comic sales completely declined until sort of the late 50s, early 60s. In the place of superheroes, you actually had things like westerns and rubbish like that, really. Westerns, horror, and really that's what brought in the Comics Code Authority at the end of the day. But yeah, you finally in 1959 got the rise of superheroes again, and in particular Julius Schwartz, the editor of DC Comics at the time, decided that you were going to have new versions of old favourites. So you had a new Flash, and in particular you had a new Green Lantern, which was this guy, Hal Jordan, originally a fighter pilot and a test pilot for Ferris Industries and Ferris Aircraft. Hal got the call one day and saw an alien dying in a green suit with a lantern beside him. That alien, of course, was Abin Sur, Green Lantern of Sector 2814, which is our sector. Dying, said that he needed to pass the ring on to Hal Jordan, and pass the ring on he did. Hal, retroactively, wasn't actually the original choice for Green Lantern. It was Guy Gardner. But Guy Gardner was visiting his sick and dying, it turns out, mother, and the ring chose who was closest and most available, and it turned out that that was Hal. Now that's a decision that sort of rebounded throughout the ages and echoed throughout the ages. So yeah, Green Lantern stayed on Earth quite a bit, fought villains like the Black Hand and Sinestro and all those type of guys. And for, you know, 10 years sort of just did the normal superhero thing that normal superheroes did. Battle the Star Sapphire, Carol Ferris, without knowing it was Carol originally. And just, you know, a lot of his adventures were earthbound. He did get to interact with the Guardians of Oa quite a bit. I do have some of them. I've not read a lot of them, if I'm being honest, because they're very, very old comics, and, you know, old comics have problems that old comics will always have. But I do have them, and I fully intend to read them. But what I flick through it is your standard 1960s comic book fare. He did join the Justice League, though. He was part of the crew that fought Starro. And he was also depicted in Justice League The New Frontier, or DC The New Frontier as it was called by Darwin Cook. And he sort of explained the rise of those sort of superheroes and where they came from and all that kind of stuff. And the fact that Superman, Batman weren't being used as much. I mean, they still had their titles in the 60s, but they were kind of goofy, if I'm being honest, and they were really quite far away from their original interpretations as it was possible to get. And Superman becoming increasingly irrelevant in the 60s and 70s anyway, being very, very conservative and patriotic, and really that's not what America was like at the time. Speaking of which, in 1970 it was decided that Green Lantern wasn't very relevant. By two people, mainly, Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams, both of whom had worked on Batman in the late 60s and had worked to change him into a more darker version of what we originally had, which, you know, Rainbow Batman. Anything that you've seen in The Brave and the Bold, the TV series, that's pretty much Batman in the 60s, so a little bit goofy. But Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil tried to change that, and they wanted to do the same with Green Lantern. So they paired him up with Green Arrow. Now, Denny O'Neil, very, very liberal kind of guy, same as Neil Adams, but Denny wanted to inject as much of his politics into the Green Lantern as he possibly could. So they came up with a story called Hard Travelling Heroes. And basically what that was Green Arrow taking Green Lantern on a road trip across America. Green Arrow, of course, being at that time very anarchic, very liberal. Not as far as I'm aware, he wasn't in charge of his company, Queen Industries wasn't actually in charge of that, so he had no money. But he was definitely womanising, hard drinking, hard living, and always up for the little guy, which, you know, continues to this day. So he decided that Green Lantern needed a dose of reality, and there's a few very famous things that came out of it. Number one being the African American, when they were fighting against a slumlord. An African American came out and basically chided Green Lantern, chided Hal Jordan for not standing up for the guys on his own planet. He'd liberate the pink skins and the purple skins and the orange skins, but he wouldn't do the same for the black skins. It was a comment on, you know, segregation at the time, which was still very much enforced in certain places in America. And, you know, it was really to bring that into sharp relief. You know, Green Lantern would go all around the galaxy, helping out all different coloured skins people, but not the guys at home who really needed his help. The other famous bit is obviously concerning Green Arrow more than Green Lantern, but it's when they discover Speedy taking heroin, because Speedy gives the reason, because the Green Arrow hadn't been around for him. Because of that, he turned to drugs to help. Very, very, very hard hitting stuff at the time, really well regarded now. However, at the time, didn't sell. So it was actually cancelled in 1974 by Julius Schwartz. Hal then appeared in a lot of backup issues in The Flash. Didn't really make much of an impact again, but the series was started again in 1976, and yeah, continued for a little while. Jon Stewart took over in 1984-85 when Hal left due to not being able to, the Guardians of the Universe not wanting him to be around Carol Ferris. Hal disagreed, dropped the ring, walked off, and Jon Stewart took over for a year. And then the Crisis on Infinite Earths brought Hal Jordan back, and he stayed until about 1993, I believe it is, 93, when things started to go wrong for him in a big way. He had had a lot of self-doubt, he had been getting older, he had white at his temples. He was getting old, and DC Comics just felt that the character in itself was getting old, so they decided to get rid of him. They did this by basically destroying his home city of Coast City. Cyborg Superman had a massive grudge against Superman. Basically, he felt that Superman had killed his wife. Go read it. It's in Tales of the Corps. It's a very good story, but I'm not going to spoil it for you. But Cyborg Superman, Hank Henshaw, decided that Superman needed to be got rid of, but Superman obviously died the year before. So Hank thought, this is it. This is time to take revenge on Coast City, where his wife had been born, and destroy it, obliterate it, get rid of any mention of her anywhere, and hatched a plan with the intergalactic villain Mongol to do so. So they basically destroyed Coast City. to turn it into Engine City, so they could turn Earth into another war world. This had the knock-on effect of making Hal a little bit angry. They did defeat Mongol. Hal made himself a construct out of a battle armor construct out of his green light, and knocked Mongol out with Steel's hammer. And after the fact, Mongol was incarcerated. Superman came back to life, or had never been away, as is the case. And Hal had to grieve for Coast City. 7 million people died in the whole thing. So the way he dealt with it wasn't the best. He basically used his ring to construct Coast City again, complete with people, his girlfriend, his parents. Something that you're not allowed to do as a Green Lantern, because that's making something for personal gain, which is completely against the rules. So the Guardians called him back, admonished him, and he got a little bit angry. He started calling himself Parallax. He started rampaging on Oa and around the galaxy. The Guardians actually brought Sinestro back to life to get rid of him from the antimatter universe, and Hal snapped his neck. He then walked into the power battery, infusing himself with all the Green Lantern energy possible, started calling himself Parallax, and then murdered the whole of the Guardians of the Universe, except Ganthet, who went to Earth and turned Kyle Rayner into the next Green Lantern. Eventually Parallax was beaten, but it took a lot of people to basically beat him, including Superman, whereby he ran away and wasn't seen for a little while. When he was next seen again, he was a little bit down and ashamed of his actions, didn't realise what he'd been doing, and sacrificed himself to start the sun, whereupon Hal Jordan wasn't heard from for years and years and years. Next time he turned up, he was the Spectre, having been resurrected by God to be in that role, and instead of being an angel of vengeance, which the Spectre usually is, he became an angel of redemption, mainly his own, to try and atone for his actions when he was Parallax. Well, it turned out that, of course, Parallax wasn't him at all. He had been possessed by the alien fear entity, known as Parallax, who was making him doubt himself, who was second-guessing every decision he made, and controlling him from within himself. Hal eventually became a Green Lantern again, but he came back to life and became a Green Lantern again, but nobody was really willing to work with him apart from Kyle Rayner, because they didn't trust him. They realised that it wasn't his doing, that he had been under the influence of an alien entity, but nevertheless they didn't trust him. And that lasts to this day. I mean, he's been through a lot of things in the past few years, since about 2007 was when the shit hit the fan, really, as Jeff Johns took over Green Lantern writing in the early 2000s and basically changed the game completely, and decided to sort of build a universe from the inside out, make it a lot more cosmic, make it a lot more sort of big space opera, which it always should have been. Since then you've had the Sinestro Corps War, where basically Sinestro created his own corps and went to destroy Oa. Or so people thought. It wasn't actually that at all. He just wanted the Guardians of the Universe to revoke one of the most important rules that a Green Lantern ring can have, which is basically you cannot use lethal force. They now can use lethal force. This basically brought about the prophecy of Oa in the Book of Oa, which was the Blackest Night prophecy, whereby a war of light would occur, bringing the Black Lanterns into existence, and having the Black Lanterns try and snuff out all the light in the universe to start again with a dead universe. Hal survived that. He survived the War of the Lanterns afterwards, and he survived the Alpha War and everything that came about with that. The latest war that they had was against a scientist from the beginning of the universe, who would realise that every time a Green Lantern, or indeed any lantern, uses their ring, the universe is being depleted and destroyed from within, and the emotional reservoir is depleted. That all worked out in the end, Kyle Rayner sacrificing himself for that. So as far as Hal knows, Kyle is now dead. Spoilers, by the way, but you should be reading this anyway. What's the matter with you? But the Guardians of the Universe are now dead because at the end of the Third Army story, Sinestro became infused with Parallax and possessed by Parallax and killed all the Guardians. He killed all the Guardians. So there are no Guardians now. He destroyed the central power battery on Oa. So now Mogo is being used as the base of operations, and there is a central power battery on him that's being constructed. And Hal is now the leader of the Green Lanterns. He is now air number 1 of all the Green Lanterns. So there are no Guardians, and Hal runs everything. And that's where we leave the story. That's where he currently is. He's trying to come to terms with that. He's trying to get that sorted out in his head. The fact that he leads the whole thing and the whole kit and caboodle. But he's gone from being just a normal Green Lantern to leaving, to destroying everything, to now saving everything and being the leader. So he's had a very long and storied history as Hal Jordan. He hasn't always been number 1. He hasn't always been the good guy. But he's basically the Han Solo of the Green Lantern Corps now. He's still womanizing. He's not very happy with Carol because she seems to have a thing for Kyle. Yeah, it's interesting times ahead because the whole universe now hates the Green Lanterns because they have, for some reason, they all know that every time a Lantern uses his ring, then bad things happen to the universe. Also, they think. They don't know the whole story. It's something to do with the Durlans, but I'm not sure what yet. But yeah, this is Hal Jordan anyway. This is the DC Universe Classics version of Hal Jordan in his classic Green Lantern suit. Not the new 52 one. This is the classic suit that he would have worn. Now this body is used for a few, because I've got a Sinestro with the same body. So basically it's a standard body that they use for Green Lanterns. It's not completely muscled out. It's just a sort of, it does have muscles, but it's not big and bulky. It's quite tall, it's quite lithe. The reason for that being is that a Green Lantern's power doesn't derive from punching people in the head a lot like Superman or Batman. He's a fit and healthy human being, but he's not Batman, basically. Because he doesn't need it, because he's got the power ring, you see. So he can basically make anything in his imagination. The only limit to a Green Lantern's power is their imagination and the willpower that they have, the ability to overcome fear. And that's the only sort of limitation they have, unless you're a rookie, in which case you are. You are vulnerable to the colour yellow, which was one of Green Lantern's very, very first vulnerabilities in the 50s comics, 50s and 60s. It's kind of lame. It's not as lame as being having an aversion to wood, which Alan Scott, the original Green Lantern, had. Not even a lie. Any sort of plant life and wood, which is why Solomon Grundy used to be his main villain. Well, there you go. So yeah, it's a standard male body. Very, very nice and live. Very, very nice and detailed. Lovely Green Lantern symbol there. The greens on this guy is cool, and the uniform is always cool, I feel. He's got his domino mask, which not all Green Lanterns have. That's a throwback to the 50s still, is how having a domino mask, basically to keep his secret identity under control, where it's not needed for most Green Lanterns. They don't have domino masks because it doesn't matter. They're quite happy for people to know who they are, but obviously on Earth, being the unstable emotional place that it is, yeah, it's a no-no. So yeah, standard articulation, so his arms go up, his arms go down and all the way around. He's got a bicep swivel, he's got elbow crunch there, and his hands go round and round at the wrist. He has an ab crunch, and it goes all the way back, which doesn't look good. He swivels at the waist, and his legs go out like so, forward and back, double jointed knees. Oh, I said a lie, it's not a double jointed, it's a single joint, but he has got a thigh swivel. And his ankles go up and down, but there's no rockers on them. They don't swivel from side to side. Because these are quite old figures now. He's about sort of 5-6 years old. And obviously his head goes round and round and round and does come off. Ooh. It does come off, but I'm not gonna. Because that doesn't feel good. Yeah, his head can come off, but I'm so not doing that. Yeah. His head does come off, but there's no way I'm doing that because it looks a bit too tight and a bit too... it might break if I do so. So, yeah, not going to do that because I kind of like this figure. Plus, it made a huge cracking sound. That can't be good. So I'm going to leave that. But yeah, there you go. Nothing much to say about the figure. The figure's not anything special, if I'm being honest. the reason I've got it is because I fucking love the Green Lantern car. I love Hal Jordan. Again, he's not my favourite Green Lantern. That would be Guy Gardner. And if I'm being really, really pernickety about it, this guy's my favourite Green Lantern, Sinestro, because my favourite character in the whole Green Lantern universe is Sinestro, for reasons I shall go into another time. Yeah, if you have a love of cosmic stories or police stories or just intricate sort of epic battles that have a really human heart to them, then you need to start reading Green Lantern. You need to go back and you need to read Blackest Night and you need to read Sinestro Corps. Just to realise that the heart of it is, it's all about motivation, it's all about perception, and it's all about shades of grey at the end of the day. Hal Jordan's a very black and white kind of guy, but in the last few years he's had to sort of learn that that is not what the universe is about very, very, very many shades of grey, which is why Sinestro isn't the villain that he maybe thinks he is, or maybe Atrocitus isn't the villain that he thinks he is. And it's all getting very complicated and yeah, interesting. And that's why I love it, that's why I love it so much. And I think that more people should read it, basically, and maybe avoid the film. maybe watch Emerald Dawn as the film, or Justice League War, or things like that for Green Lantern. But certainly Emerald Dawn. Maybe not First Flight, it's a bit sucky in places. I didn't much like First Flight, but Emerald Dawn, certainly. Go watch that, and watch the animated series. It's really cool. But yeah, definitely get into Green Lantern. I shall be back though next week. It's Masters Week next week. So this is how it's going to work from now on. I'm going to do Masters, Joe, Transformers, DC. That's how it's going to work from now on. And DC might be replaced with a comic or trade paperback or something that maybe you want to read. I don't know at this point. It's a bit in flux. But certainly, yeah, Masters, Joe, Transformers, DC. So it's going to be every month you're going to have one of each, I think is the best way to do it. So I have a plan. For once, I have a plan. And also I'm going to start sticking the podcast on here as well, so if people want to listen on YouTube to the podcast, then they can do so. Until next week though, that's it for me. I shall be back with a Masters review. I think it might be He-Man, or possibly even Skeletor that I do next week. So interesting times ahead. In the meantime, take care of yourselves and each other. Bye bye for now.